Hi everyone. Yes, it's another MP-44 KO video. This one is a fixed video. I've seen a lot of people have had similar issues to the ones I experienced, and there's been some discussion about the best way to go about fixing some of them, or mitigating them probably is the best word to use. I don't think some of them can really be fixed. I thought I'd just do this as more of a visual guide. It's not going to be exhaustive, but it should give you some idea of the things that you need to look out for when you get this figure, and what you might be able to do to improve some of the flaws. So I'm going to start from the top and work my way down. Seems the most logical thing to do. So give me a second to get some stuff sorted, and I will be back with a look at the first of what was actually quite a few fixes you might need to apply to this guy. Okay, so first things first, let's start at the top with Prime's head. Now, the most obvious thing, I guess, would be the dead eyes. Now, I don't have, because of what I plan to use him for, I'm not actually going to address this issue, because I have my official for the regular Prime. I want to use this guy as the battle damage Prime, and the dead eyes seem quite appropriate for that. But you can see on the official, they do have blue plastic in there. It's very difficult to see because obviously there's no LED, there's no light piping until you take the back of the head off. Now there is a you can see there's a blue transparent piece in there, which should allow for some light piping, but it's more like MP10 this in terms of how they've done the eyes, and that didn't look great either, again for the same reasons. A lot of people have taken it apart and painted it, and you can do that as I show on this head. There are 3 screws, and you have 1, 2 and 3. If you take those screws apart, you can pop the head apart, take the back piece off. Then these grey pieces and this translucent blue piece will separate. You can then either paint that with acrylic or whatever you use, or use a Gundam marker or whatever paint marker you choose to use. Let that dry, pop it all back together, screw it in, and then you'll have Prime with a bit more life to his eyes. You can do that on all of on all 3 of the Prime heads. As I said, I'm probably going to not do that, but that's a relatively easy fix. In order to do that, well, not in order to do it, but when you do it, you'll notice that there is this block in the back of his head as well, which is the ball joint peg. So that's a slightly separate issue, which I'm going to cover now. So just give me a second, and I'll be back to show you why this is a good mod. Okay, so the next mod is to do with how the head attaches and detaches. On the original Prime, the head is on, I can show you, it's on a ball joint attached to this piece here that moves. Now you can see there's the ball joint. It just pops onto the ball peg on the head. But on the original, the head, each head had the heads had a block, a space for the block to go into, which I think you probably saw when I had this. Now with the KO, each of the heads comes with its own separate block installed, and said blocks have notches on the sides, which you may just be able to make out there. And this means that those blocks catch and they don't come out very easily. And the way you're supposed to change the heads on this, or so it seems, is that you just literally pop the head off of the ball joint each time you want to do it. But that takes longer and a lot more force than I'm comfortable with. So what I did was I took each of the heads in the set, and I used a tool to slightly pry the plastic. It is quite tough because it's not the most, it's not soft plastic, it's quite rigid. But you don't want to damage the heads, obviously, so I was eventually able to get each of the blocks out of the prime heads. Once I did that, as I said, I filed down the notches on one of them and just kept the others as spares. And what that allows you to do is, instead of having to take the thing off of the ball joint, you just pop the head off. As you can see, there's a little peg hole in there and a peg on the front, and that just goes back on. And that is so much easier than having to take the thing off of the ball joint every time you want to do it. The 3 prime heads were pretty easy to do. The Starscream head was a lot tougher because that plastic is very firm, and there isn't as much space to get your tool in or whatever. I did mark mine a little bit. I've got a little bit of damage on the back there doing it. I almost gave up at one point because I thought I was going to ruin it. And inside it's quite scraped, but you don't see that, do you, when it's on? So when it was all put back together, I was able to do it quite easily. But yeah, just getting the head separated, because it sits flush more so than the other heads do. It was actually quite tricky, but yeah, just for that ease of swapping, I think it's definitely worth doing. You know, you can pop that head back on there, and you're like, oh yeah, I've had enough of Screamer, I want to pop that off. It still can be quite stiff, is the honest truth. As it's doing now, it's making me look silly on camera. Probably do with getting some more. There's a little bit of a nub left on there, so I probably need to file that down a bit more. But you get the idea behind it. Just pop that back on, and then that restores the functionality. And yeah, it's a really worthwhile little fix to do, and quite an easy one, to be honest. You don't need to be a modder extraordinaire to do that. The next thing I would talk about with the head, while we're on that subject, are the antennae on the spare prime heads. Out of the box, they came with the same issue as MP-44, the official MP-44, I should say, which was that they were bent or like warped, but they were a lot worse, much worse. In fact, they were almost sort of boomerang shaped on mine. I just applied the standard fix for stuff like that. I ran each of the antennae under a hot tap until they were a little bit more malleable. Then I bent them and held them in shape for a while, took them out, literally rinsed and repeated until they were sort of acceptable. I mean, they're still not completely straight. I probably could have done it a bit longer, but you know, for me, they're straight enough. Considering I'm not planning on using these heads that much anyway, I was happy enough with the results. Could always give them another go though. That's the sort of thing you can do quite easily. Some people use boiling water. I just used the hot tap, and some people use hair dryers to heat it. You can do it with the heads, while they're still attached to the heads if you want, or you can disassemble, take the antennae out and do it that way. So whichever your preference. But it looks a lot better when they are sitting, or when they are straighter anyway. As I say, not perfect, but definitely a lot better than they were when I originally took them out of the box. Let's pop those away. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything relating to the head. So if you give me a second, I'll just get myself sorted and move on to the next thing I want to discuss. Right, the next thing that we need to talk about is the ab crunch. This is one of the potentially one of the figure breaking issues with this KO. Now, there are a couple of things that I'd like to point out actually about this. I started at the back, but I will flip them around quickly. Out of the box, this KO came with the front ab crunch, or not front. It's not an ab crunch. It's part of the transformation. So that came quite loose. It was connected, but it seemed quite high. So I pushed it down, to lock it in place, but it needed I think it actually just did both then, but it needed an extra crunch, because the first time I locked it, it locked once. There you go. So it's locked, but that's not as far down as it can go. You can give it an extra push, and there you go. It sits closer, more like the official. Still not quite as close as the official, but closer. Now that thing, once that's in, it locks the torso, essentially. It locks the rear transformation joint. If you try and pull it with that enabled, with that locked, it won't go anywhere. What has been happening, because there was resistance, because the actual ab crunch feature wasn't working as intended, people were doing that and breaking the pin in the middle, and then you've got a prime who's basically been bisected. So just to demonstrate what I mean, with this, I'll pull the windows out, with this piece released, it unlocks the rear transformation joint, which, if I unfurl prime, that's what I was using as the ab crunch to begin with. And you'll see there's the lock, that little tab there, locks up in there and prevents him from wobbling about and moving. Now you can use that as an ab crunch, but it doesn't look great. It's not the best. Oh, his backpack's coming apart. So the primary ab crunch actually sits down there and it locks into place. And with all of this mechanism locked in, when you manipulate the ab crunch, it's supposed to just release from the tab inside there. But what's happened with this KO is they've slightly changed the design of the tab. So on the official, it's quite a small little notch and tab system. So there's not much to catch. There's not a lot of resistance. I think some people complained that it was too loose, so that's probably why they redesigned it for this KO, but they made it a little bit too big, and as such, it basically doesn't move. So people have been forcing this pin here and snapping him. So what I did was, once I released this transformation joint, I popped a tool down in there, just a flathead screwdriver, and levered it up. And that did release the joint. And that's how I could see that the piece in question was was much bigger and too pronounced. Now, in order to resolve that, I did a couple of things. The first thing I did was I loosened this screw in the blue section here a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. Enough so that I could feel that it was going to release, but with a bit of resistance. Then I popped it out using the tool again. And I'll just put prime back together, and we'll click him into place. There we go, it's all locked back in. And when I did that, I pulled forward, and as you'll see, that released them. Now, it wasn't quite that easy to begin with. Hopefully you can see on this white piece here, there is a raised portion, and that's what clips in under there with the bit you can't see. So I shaved that very carefully with a craft knife, taking just a sliver off at a time, and then kept trying it until I was happy that it would still lock in, to the point when it wouldn't feel loose, and yet it releases really easily for the true ab crunch. So you can see that's a totally different part than the transformation joint, and that allows for you to move him around like that. He can move left and right on that axis there. He can transform, he can come right the way forward. That's the proper ab crunch. Actually, that's probably better because I've moved it out further now. You can see that raised section there is what catches. You see the blue plastic on it where it's obviously rubbing against the blue. The reason I didn't just do it all with the screw and shave some of it was because I thought that if it ever wears down a bit, I can tighten this screw again to apply more friction. But hopefully it won't. And to be honest, I usually leave this ab crunch disengaged because obviously I want it in a more dynamic pose, so I'm not clicking it in and out all the time anyway. But yeah, that's one of the major issues with this figure, probably the biggest one in terms of breakage that I've seen, apart from perhaps the knees. So yeah, this is I would say that's an essential fix. You just need to be quite careful when you're doing it, because the last thing you want to do is snap the thing in half. But once you've done it, as I've shown, you can get a lot more articulation out of him, and it looks a lot better and cleaner than the transformation joint, because there's one contiguous piece there, whereas the transformation joint leaves a big gap. So that's definitely one of the best things to do. Okay, that's that covered. Let's move on to another section. Okay, so I've got Prime's chest exploded here, and that's just to reveal this post I want to show you. Now on my copy, it's exceedingly tight tolerance wise. Now this is the clip for the tab that clips into this part here to lock the cab in alt mode. Now getting that engaged and disengaged, you probably saw in my review, was a nightmare. So what you can do is you can just file that down slightly to make that an easier catch and release. You don't want to do it too much, because obviously it could then become loose, but that is the one you would need to do to address that issue. I haven't actually filed it on mine because I'm not planning to transform it again, but that is the piece that you would need to file if you so desired. Anyway, as I said, not going to do it myself right now, but I just wanted to show you. On to the next thing. Alright, so the next thing I would talk about is the arm panel. Now, I'm still not 100% happy with this on mine, but if you can see the difference here, on this side, a little stress mark there, but on this side, that arm panel sits completely flush, and it tabs in nice and easily. Doesn't pop out, it's absolutely fine. On this side, however, it was leaving a much bigger gap because it kept popping out and sitting lower, and you'll see that it's not quite as flush on the bottom and it's not quite as aligned properly. I did a couple of things for this, neither of which have completely rectified the issue, but I didn't want to go too far for fear of causing unsightly visual damage. So what I did was I took a craft knife and I shaved the plastic on this end here along the top here for a little bit to try and get it to fit that piece better so that it wasn't pushed out. And I also did a little bit on the bottom there. And the final thing I did was use some floor polish on the tiny tab there to give it a little bit more purchase when it is locked in. And as you see, it sits reasonably flush. There's a bit of a gap there where it's pushed in a bit more, which actually does help it stay in. Compared to that one, you'll see that one's almost completely flush. That one's pushed in a little bit. I can't, as I say, I've not been able to get that to mirror that. I probably could if I messed around with it a little bit more, but for my money, that looks okay from most angles. I'm not really worried too much about it. My official has a bit of a gap there anyway, so it doesn't, and that's on the left one as well actually, so I wonder if, again, with the reverse engineering, because the left of the official was slightly off. Let's bring that in and show you. There's the right arm panel on the official, and that's completely flush. The left, there is a bit of a gap and it does indent a bit more. So I wonder, again, with the reverse engineering, the tolerances being what they are, it's exacerbated the issue. But anyway, unlike the official, this doesn't have paint on it, so you can kind of slice away it with a knife for a bit to make it a little bit better. But yeah, that's it's not a massive issue, but it's one worth mentioning. Something you might want to try. Also, while we're on the arms, I've mentioned that with the hands, I did apply silicone oil, silicone spray to them on these, on this portion here on the rivet. It's still very stiff, but it doesn't squeak quite as much as it did. I don't think there's much you can do about it really. It's kind of just the way it is, but it is better than it was. So that's, again, you might want to put some silicone spray or other lubricant in there, plastic safe lubricant in there to help with that squeakiness. But I don't really think it helps with the stiffness. While we're on the hands, actually, the other thing is the tabs here. don't really hold the blaster very well, not completely securely. Again, there was some gunking them. I kind of scraped whatever gunk was in there out. That didn't really make much of a difference. So what I did was I added, you know, on the usual tabbing mechanism we've got on the Masterpiece weapons here. Sorry, just there. You can see the tabs that go in. What I did was I just added a little bit of floor polish to both tabs and let that dry. Again, it hasn't completely rectified it. It's still a bit of a problem, but it's better than it was. Although, in all honesty, it's not terrible anyway, because although it doesn't hold the gun securely when you put the tab in, with the hand closed, you know, it's not falling out of there unless you're throwing the thing around, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. So it will hold the gun, you know, in place, which is all you really want. And it's not, you know, crooked as it is on some official MPs as well. So that covers the issues I had with the hands. So anyway, I think that's pretty much everything for the upper body that I wanted to talk about. There are issues with the sort of pelvic area, which I'll cover when we talk about the legs. And to be honest, I left the hips well alone on mine because they're not that problematic. And I don't trust the softness of the plastic and the ratchets and things. But anyway, I'll talk about that as we go on. Let's move on to the next section of the video and the other major fix. So there are two problems with the knee ratchets, and sort of see if I can demonstrate. So as with MP-44, the official, you have this two-pronged approach. You have a primary knee ratchet there, which you can see works as intended, and that moves the knee there. Then what happens is when you get to this stopping point here, there's a small channel down there, and this tab inserts into that channel. It gets to that point, and then it engages the secondary ratchet. But as you'll hear, there's not actually any ratchet noise when I do that. And that was the problem with the official MP-44 as well. Even though this was supposed to be remedied on the KO, it seems to still be a problem with some copies at least. So there are a couple of things I've done. I actually had a further issue with this leg, which I'll kind of go into once I disassemble it a bit. But the first thing I did was I used silicone spray on the knee ratchets, which freed them up and allowed this piece to slide a lot easier, this tab, because it wasn't really moving very well. The ratchets weren't moving very well. Just using that silicone spray greases everything up a little bit and lets it move a lot more freely, and it's plastic safe as well. To fix or attempt the same fix as I did with MP-44, the official MP-44, you need to disassemble the legs slightly. I will say that the fix that I applied to my official figure was almost a year ago now, and it is still holding up well. Obviously I don't manipulate my figures as much as some people do, but I haven't had any problems. It seems very strong. It was only the one knee that was broken out of the box. The other one has still got a fully functioning ratchet even this year on. So anyway, so what I do is obviously these tabs need to come down here, so you just pull that down and that will let you see the inner workings of the leg. Now all we need to take out for the purpose of this fix are these two screws here, that one there and that one there. So we'll just pop those out. They are a different size, so you won't get them mixed up, thankfully, but make sure you don't lose them, as with any time you do this. Probably should have a little pot to put them in, really. Unscrew that one as well. And out it comes. That will then, if we also pop the tab off of here, that will allow us to take the leg off. And we can, actually, before I put it to one side, I'll explain the issue I had with the rest of it. There is a channel, as I mentioned here, that this tab is supposed to fit into. Now, on my left leg, that was fine. There was a channel. On that side I had a mould defect where there was no gap between this piece here and the flat piece at the back. So what I had to do was disassemble the leg further so that I could get access, I could remove this piece and get access to that channel from underneath and the top. And the way I did that, and I'm not going to do it again because this is quite a unique thing, I think. I don't think many figures are affected. But essentially, if you remove these 4 screws here, that back part of the leg will pop off, and it's just on a mushroom peg there. You can take it off, and that will give you access. What will probably happen is the ratchet and the spring will fly at your face, so you need to be sort of prepared for that. But anyway, that will give you access to the top of this piece here. And as you may be able to see, there is a gap behind there. Now, as to what you can use to score out a channel in there, it took me multiple attempts to do so, and I had to use a variety of tools, but in the end I used these, which are a locksmith set, which I happen to have from when a key broke in one of my door locks once, and I just used the smaller ones, not the flexible ones here, but the harder ones, but the smallest ones I had, to kind of get in there and score out some of the plastic as best I could. I even used a sort of Stanley knife as well, an X-Acto knife, call it what you will, to get in there and from behind, because this piece will come off, this whole piece. You can take that screw out and take this flat piece off as well. And you can then sort of score it to your heart's content. In fact, you may even be able to do that. I didn't take this lower part of the leg off, but looking at the way there is a screw there, in fact, rather than disassemble this whole bit, you may be able to take this screw out there and pop this side piece off and work on that independently of taking the rest of the leg apart, and then pop this bit back on. But however you access it, that's what you have to do if you have that issue. But I think I was just an unlucky recipient of a particularly bad one there. With the leg itself, anyway, so with the ratchet, you'll see it comes in a couple of parts. So the actual ratchet part here with the tab is there, and you'll see the ratchet is there. So we can put him to one side for the moment. Then we look at the little ratcheted piece itself, and you'll see that on it there are 2 tabs. Sort of, I can find my little screwdriver. They are there and there. And they correspond to a couple of channels on the inside of the leg here, this piece here. As you can see, this is quite goopy because I've put lubricant in there. I don't know how well it's going to show up again. But anyway, there are a couple of channels. There's one there and there's one there. Now, those pieces, as I've said, they correspond to the 2 notches, so that the piece can only go in one orientation. But the problem is, again, I don't know how well it will show up, there's quite a lot of play in it. Now, obviously this is by design, and it was on the official MP-44, but what happens is that play means that the ratchet, this part moves and flexes, and then the teeth of the ratchet don't engage properly. You probably even see they're starting to get a little worn already due to being used as more of a friction joint. So that's why you don't get any sound. The ratchets don't click effectively. What I did with the official, and what I propose to do with this one, is to put a little bit, not too much, just a small bit of super glue in there to secure this in place so that it doesn't move. That resolved the issue with my official figure. So it's obviously pretty easy. You just grab your super glue, and you really don't need much. That's the thing. I did have a brush version a while back, but I haven't got that at the moment. I literally just put one dab in there like that, and like maybe another one in there like that, just to hold it in place. Don't want to drown it, just want to put enough in so that it secures. I may have actually put a little bit too much in there now, but we shall see. You can always remove excess if it feels like it's too much. Then you just put it in there like that and hold it in place for a little bit, as you would with anything you're trying to bond. It will only go in one place anyway, so you just want to make sure that it fits in and it's where it should be, because you're not going to be able to move this after it's bonded. So I just kept that pressed for a bit to keep the two pieces bonded. I have got a little bit of overspill there, but I don't think it's anything too major. That's only a very tiny amount there, and it's not going to interfere with any of the workings, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Anyway, obviously this is not going to dry on camera quick enough for me to show you, so I'll leave this drying for a little bit and I'll come back a bit later and show you the hopefully finished results. And I'm hoping it will have the same effect as it did on the official MP-44. It may not work the same way, but I don't think it's going to do any harm, and I have read reports that people have been performing this minor piece of surgery to their figures to resolve this particular issue. So we shall see, fingers crossed. Anyway, let's move on to the next issue. So as you can see, I've reassembled the legs on both sides now. It has made a difference, although not as much of a difference as I was hoping for. I'll freely admit that. So the ratchets engage, as you can see, the main ratchets. When we get to the part where the little tab is supposed to go into the notch, it goes in, but then I can feel the ratchets, but they're not audible. Now, the ratchets in this figure, in some places on mine, are very soft. So, I don't know. I mean, I can definitely feel that they're engaging. It doesn't feel like a friction joint. There's a definite bump as you go over each tooth in the ratchet. But that's not how I would expect that to sound, which is disappointing, because the same thing on the official did resolve the issue and made that quite a clicky ratchet, if memory serves. And that's the same again. You can definitely see there's especially as I come back, you can see it goes sort of a step as it clicks on that ratchet before engaging the primary one. Yeah, I guess, as I said, I think this figure just essentially has some issues with ratchets anyway. The thighs on mine are very quiet. I've definitely seen videos where people's ratchets were a lot louder than that. See, they're barely audible when they move down. And I don't really have any loose hips. Some people have reported that, and that's why you'll probably see some posts elsewhere on modding this area to make this hip skirt a bit looser and reduce the play in the legs. Well, I don't have too much in mind, so I'm not going to mess around with that, so I won't be covering that. But anyway, that's what the ratchets sound like in both places after I've performed the fix, in quotes, because it doesn't appear to have fixed too much. What I'll do though is I'll just bring in the official one quickly so we can see the difference. So here's the official MP-44. You can hear the difference in the ratchets there, and again with the leg, this is the leg that I didn't have to fix, or haven't had to fix so far. There's the primary. You can hear that click on the secondary one, and it's just that's the knee I didn't fix. The knee I did fix, I glued the part here, and again you can hear Not as loud as the primary ratchets, but definitely a far more audible click than with the secondary. And I mean, I guess that's the difference. At the end of the day, the ratchets on the KO here were softer to begin with, so even though they're now locked in place and working as they should, you know, I can feel the detents. I can't hear them. There's no audible click. But anyway, you know, if you've got the same problem, it's probably worth performing that. It's a fairly simple fix, to be honest. The glue doesn't take long to dry, and it might make them last a bit longer. But yeah, I think it's just, you know, we were told these knees were going to be fixed. They haven't really been fixed. It's been redesigned slightly, but I don't think it makes it any better in practice. So it's a little bit of a shame, considering that was one of the major selling points of this KO. It was a literal selling point that they said had been addressed. But you know, it's not too bad, I guess. The joint still functions. It just doesn't make that satisfying clicky sound. Anyway, let's move away from ratchets, leg ratchets now, and discuss the next issue to do with the legs. Okay, so the next problem that I had with the legs were these panels, and this seems to be an issue on every copy I've seen, again in every video, every still. Everyone who hasn't addressed it will have this issue, and that is that the panels don't align. Well, they align, but they don't stay tabbed in. And I think it's because on the original they worked with friction, but obviously as a reverse engineered KO, the tolerances, as they are on so much of this figure, are slightly off. Now the original obviously had a layer of paint on it, a coat of paint. I think that made the tabs thick enough so that they would stay tabbed together. The KO doesn't have that, so what I did to address that was I went back to my old friend floor polish. If I bring this down, I can show you a little bit. There is a tab in here, this tiny little tab there, which goes into a notch there, and on this side if I release that, you can see there is a tab in there which goes into a notch. So I put a coat of floor polish on that, allowed it to dry. It worked, but it wasn't entirely flush when I closed it, so I put another coat on, again allowed that to dry, and that appears to have resolved it. Now I'm under no illusions about that staying on there and surviving repeated transformations. It will wear off because of the friction, so you may need to reapply it over time if you transform your figure a lot. But if you just display in bot mode and have it clipped together, you should be good to go for a while at least. Another thing I did was I slightly filed down this peg here. You can see some marks on it probably where I've done that, because it was very tight. It wasn't coming out of there very easily. So I did that. One thing I haven't done on this leg yet, and I need to, you can probably see there is a stress mark. Now that is caused by another tab that links this piece to this piece. And I don't know if I can do it, but you can see there's a, if I try and pull it apart, it's very, this side is horrendously stiff, and this is the one that's stress marked. Yeah, there you go, you can see in there, hopefully, just about, there's the tab, and that tabs into that piece, and that is stressed, and it doesn't show up in bot mode, which is why I haven't done it, because I don't plan to transform it again. So I just thought, nah, I'll leave that one. But in alt mode, that shows up on the bed of the truck, and you probably saw it, or you would have seen it if you looked at my video, which you may have watched, may have not have watched, I guess. But yeah, what happens is when you put those two together, it's very, very stiff, which makes it a real pain if you're going to transform it. So what I did on one side, as you can see there, I've put the leg back together now, and with that extra coat, it keeps those pieces together. See, there's no gap there, they sit as they should. On this side, I have actually filed the tab down, so that tab pops out nice and easy, and that's what the tab should look like. Excuse me. But yeah, the tab was just that little bit bigger on the other side, and I didn't get around to filing it, and as I say, I'm not sure I will now. But that's what the issue was with that. So I did also file the tab down at the top there on this leg as well to make it a bit easier. Generally speaking, none of this clips together as well as the official. Like, these don't align as well. Things, I don't know, they're a bit better now. Someone has allegedly measured the inner workings and said that they're slightly bigger on this than they are on MP-44. Yeah, I don't know about that because I haven't, but that would account for why things are a little bit off when they come to clip together. But I mean, it's not horrendous. I've seen official bots that don't clip together as well as this does, so yeah, it's not too bad. But it's just the tolerances appear to be a little bit off when you look at them. So when it does clip, while it does clip together, you can see the panels just aren't quite as flush as they ought to be, maybe. And certainly, if I bring it in, the official is slightly better in that regard. Again, not 100% perfect, but it does clip together that little bit better. You can see actually the difference there in the design. At the back, you have the blue piece on MP-44 there, which is white on the KO, and you can also see that on the front. This knee pad has a white piece there, whereas on the KO, that piece, if I push it down a bit, you can see is blue. So yeah, just a few subtle differences. But anyway, that covers the bulk of the legs. There's one more thing that I'll mention actually while we're here, because I haven't actually got a fix for it. I'm not sure there is one really. One thing I've noticed is that these ratchets in the feet, I don't know if they're different than MP-44 or whether they just don't sit as flush, but I've noticed that the detents on them, there's no completely level setting for it. Again, I think I mentioned that in my review. So you have 2 clicks up when obviously they're not flush, and a click down when it's not, and then this one should be the level one, but I found that even with this, unless you have got ankle tilt and various poses enabled, it doesn't sit as flush as it could. It seems to be a little bit better now actually, so maybe it has freed up slightly, maybe continuous manipulations letting it tab in better, because maybe that's what it was. There is a little notch there and a tab that it goes into when you straighten the foot. Maybe that was just catching a bit, and as I've transformed it, yeah, see, that one seems to be a little bit worse. You can see that's not as level, and that one's down further. There's also a little bit of a tilt in the toe, which, you know, may account for it. Again, sort of very minor issues with tolerances can create larger issues. So yeah, but to be honest, most people aren't going to have him standing straight. You know, you can see he leans forward a little bit. You would probably have it in some sort of pose that would mitigate that anyway, using the ankle tilt or the knee bend or however you would have it. So anyway, that covers the sort of lower portion of the legs that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, just give me a second. We'll be back with some final thoughts. Okay, so final thoughts really. Some of these fixes, or mods or whatever you want to call them, they're pretty easy to do, and they definitely help with the overall quality of the figure. Obviously in my review I said I couldn't recommend it, and I stand by those comments. I think out of the box, this has too many issues really, way more than the official did. You know, the official I only really ever had a problem with my left knee. This had problems with both knees, and you know, all the other things that I've pointed out. So yeah, I stand by the comments I made. I still think that it's got too many issues. I'm sure we'll see later revisions that don't have as many. I think in fact, even in the same batch, Some had fewer issues than others. Some people I've seen their videos that they had knee and hip ratchets that were a lot louder than mine, so I don't know what's going on there, whether there were variances in just the first batch and some people got improvements in that. Who knows? It's a KO. But anyway, I can only speak to what I received, and as far as I'm concerned, what I received was a bit of a disappointment because of all the things I had to resolve. And said things took quite a number of hours to resolve. You know, if I added it up in terms of my hourly rate, this figure would have cost me at least £100 more than it actually did. You know, in terms of the time I've sunk into it to resolve these issues. Anyway, with that said, like, now that I've done it, I have a more favourable impression of it because it can do the things that it couldn't do out of the box. I don't think any of this will have fixed the alt mode alignment and stuff like that. That's a separate issue, and I'm not hugely bothered about that. So, you know, I think my comments with that still stand. And again, some people had better alignment than others. You know, other copies seem to be better than mine. But in terms of the robot mode, which is what I'm primarily focused on, it is definitely better now. I mean, as you can see, it can pull some decent poses, and I still like the matte finish on it. I know the glossy paint finish looks good as well, but I do like the matte finish on it. You do feel like you can mess around with it a bit more than you can with the official without scratching it too much, even though obviously some of the paint, you know, the limited paint apps on it did come off, like the corners here and the headlight there. But I've seen those on, again, almost every review I've seen seems to have had some paint off of there and whatever. But yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is the ab crunch fix, because now he can get the really expressive dynamic poses that he couldn't before. The knee fix, as I say, the functionality was there, hasn't really made the ratchets any better to my mind, but it has at least given me the peace of mind that it's not going to explode, or, you know, whatever, that piece isn't going to get worse like it did on the official. So it's a good preventative maintenance task. The shaving of various tabs and application of floor polish have allowed things to sit together for a much cleaner look. So I like that now. The fact that I don't have these big panel gaps on the sides of the legs is great. I like that shaving some of those tabs as well lets the legs clip in and out easier and makes the panels at the back sit a little bit more flush as well. The arm tab, again, not 100% satisfied with that, but it's almost as good as my official, so I can live with it. The gun, you know, again, it held before I did it with the fist closed, so, you know, I'm not going to be going around with his palm open waving the gun, am I? So that's fine. The head mod, really good now. It works like the official, so that's really useful. Again, that was a bit fiddly, especially the Starscream head. That took a good hour all told to do all the heads, at least an hour. I think the Starscream one was a real pain to do. But yeah, definitely worth doing. You know, now it's I wouldn't say 50% better, but at least a 25% better figure than it was when I took it out of the box. So yeah, I don't know. I think had I received it like this, I probably would have been more favourable in my review and probably would have recommended it. So yeah, if you get one that's like this out of the box, great for you. I can see why some people have been commenting saying, actually, well, mine's fine. What are you talking about? You know, not mainly on my video, but in various forums I'm on. Well, as I said, I can only speak to what I received. I can't review what I don't have in hand. And had I had one like this out of the box, yeah, I probably would have said it's worth 70 quid of your money. This now, to me, yeah, is a lot better than it was. So hopefully this video's helped you. You know, it will allow you to sort of tune up anything that you need to. It's not exhaustive by any means. There will be other stuff that I haven't covered, I'm sure. Particularly the hips. You can disassemble this whole thing, take the hips apart, use paper to remove play. You know, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. Luckily, the hips in mine, I don't really have any play, and I'm not really bothered because the official did. a little side-to-side play. This has a little forward-to-back play, but I'm not too worried. And I'm not even really worried about the hip skirts not popping back and forward. I'd rather have the sturdiness. And I don't want to go messing with the soft plastic ratchets in there. Because as you heard, they're very, very soft. By as you click through the detents, they're barely audible, particularly on the lower ratchet on the legs. So I'm gonna leave those well enough alone. But I think everything else now is pretty much there or thereabouts. There's not much else I want to do to him to get him up to snuff. So I'm not re-evaluating. I'm not going to go, oh yeah, now I'm endorsing it wholeheartedly, because I can't tell you what you're going to get. You might get it's a bit of a crapshoot. You might get a really good one, or you might get one that's like mine and needs hours of attention to fix, or at least to mitigate some of the issues. So anyway, thanks for tuning in again. As I say, I hope this was of some use, and if you've got any other ideas for fixes or any other improved procedures that you've discovered while you're modding yours, please leave a comment in the section below. And until next time, take care everyone, and have fun.